Alex Wright, Alex Wright, Alex Wright, Alex Wright, right, Alex Wright, Alex Wright, right, Alex Wright, Alex Wright, by Alex Wright, by Alex Wright, and Alex Wright, and Alex Wright, by Alex Wright, by Alex Wright, Alex Wright, Alex Wright, by Wright, and Wright, by Wright, Wright, Brian Adams, Brian Adams, 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 Brian Adams, Adams, Brian Adams, by Brian Adams, and Brian Adams, by Brian Adams, Brian Adams, by Adams, and Adams, by Adams, Adams, Bret the Hitman Hart, Bret the Hitman Hart, Bret Hart, Bret Hart, the Hitman, Hart, Hart, Bret the Hitman Hart, Bret Hart, the Hitman, Hart, Bret the Hitman Hart, Bret Hart, by Bret the Hitman Hart, and Bret the Hitman Hart, by Bret the Hitman Hart, Bret the Hitman Hart, by Bret Hart, and Bret Hart, by Bret Hart, Bret Hart, by the Hitman, and the Hitman, by the Hitman, by Hart, and Hart, by Hart, Hart, Billy Kidman, Billy Kidman, 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 Billy Kidman, Kidman, Billy Kidman, Kidman, by Billy Kidman, and Billy Kidman, by Billy Kidman, Billy Kidman, by Kidman, and Kidman, by Kidman, Kidman, Barbarian, 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 by Barbarian, and Barbarian, by Barbarian, Barbarian, Booker T, Booker T, Booker T, Booker T, by Booker T, and Booker T, by Booker T, Booker T, Chris the Crippler Benoit, Chris the Crippler Benoit, Chris Benoit, Chris Benoit, 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 the Crippler, Chris the Crippler Benoit, Chris Benoit, Benoit, the Crippler, Chris the Crippler Benoit, Chris Benoit, by Chris the Crippler Benoit, and Chris the Crippler Benoit, by Chris the Crippler Benoit, Chris the Crippler Benoit, by Chris Benoit, and Chris Benoit, by Chris Benoit, Chris Benoit, by Benoit, and Benoit, by Benoit, Benoit, by the Crippler, and the Crippler, by the Crippler, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chavo Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Chavo, Chavo Guerrero, Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chavo Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero Jr., by Chavo Guerrero Jr., and Chavo Guerrero Jr., by Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chavo Guerrero Jr., by Chavo Guerrero, and Chavo Guerrero, by Chavo Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, by Chavo, and Chavo, by Chavo, Chavo, by Guerrero, and Guerrero, Guerrero, Kurt Hennig, Kurt Hennig, 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 Kurt Hennig, Hennig, Kurt Hennig, by Kurt Hennig, and Kurt Hennig, by Kurt Hennig, Kurt Hennig, by Hennig, and Hennig, by Hennig, Hennig, Chris the Lionheart Jericho, Chris the Lionheart Jericho, Chris Jericho, Chris Jericho, 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 the King of Loopholes, the King of Loopholes, Chris the Lionheart Jericho, Chris Jericho, Jericho, the King of Loopholes, Chris the Lionheart Jericho, Chris Jericho, by Chris the Lionheart Jericho, and Chris the Lionheart Jericho, by Chris the Lionheart Jericho, Chris the Lionheart Jericho, by Chris Jericho, and Chris Jericho, by Chris Jericho, Chris Jericho, by Jericho, and Jericho, by Jericho, Jericho, Disco Inferno, Disco Inferno, Disco, Disco, Disco Inferno, Disco, Disco Inferno, by Disco Inferno, and Disco Inferno, by Disco Inferno, Disco Inferno, by Disco, and Disco, by Disco, Disco, Dean the Iceman Malenko, Dean the Iceman Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds, the man of 1,000 holds, Dean Malenko, Dean Malenko, 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 Dean the Iceman Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds, Dean Malenko, Malenko, Dean the Iceman Malenko, Dean Malenko, by Dean the Iceman Malenko, and Dean the Iceman Malenko. By Dean the Iceman Malenko. Dean the Iceman Malenko. By the man of 1,000 holds. And the man of 1,000 holds. By the man of 1,000 holds. The man of 1,000 holds. By Dean Malenko. And Dean Malenko. By Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko. By Malenko. And Malenko. By Malenko. Malenko. Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page. DDP. DDP. Page. Page. Diamond Dallas Page. DDP. Page. Diamond Dallas Page. By Diamond Dallas Page. And Diamond Dallas Page. By Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page. By DDP. And DDP. By DDP. DDP. By Page. And Page. By Page. Page. Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero. Eddie. Eddie Guerrero. Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero. By Eddie Guerrero. And Eddie Guerrero. By Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero. By Eddie. And Eddie. By Eddie. Eddie. By Guerrero. And Guerrero. By Guerrero. Guerrero. Goldberg. 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 By Goldberg. And Goldberg. By Goldberg. Goldberg. By Goldberg. Hollywood Hogan. Hollywood Hogan. 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 Hollywood Hogan. Hogan. Hollywood Hogan. By Hollywood Hogan. And Hollywood Hogan. By Hollywood Hogan. Hollywood Hogan. By Hollywood Hogan. By Hogan. And Hogan. By Hogan. Hogan. Juventud Guerrera. Juventud Guerrera. Juventud. Juventud. Hoovy. Hoovy. Guerrera. Guerrera. Juventud Guerrera. Juventud. Hoovy. Guerrera. Juventud Guerrera. By Juventud Guerrera. And Juventud Guerrera. By Juventud Guerrera. Juventud Guerrera. By Juventud. And Juventud. By Juventud. Juventud. By Hoovy. And Hoovy. By Hoovy. Hoovy. By Guerrera. And Guerrera. By Guerrera. Guerrera. Chris Kanyon. Chris Kanyon. 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 Chris Kanyon. Kanyon. Chris Kanyon. By Chris Kanyon. And Chris Kanyon. By Chris Kanyon. Chris Kanyon. By Kanyon. And Kanyon. By Kanyon. Kanyon. Kevin Big Sexy Nash. Kevin Big Sexy Nash. Big Sexy. Big Sexy Nash. Nash. Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash. Kevin Big Sexy Nash. Big Sexy Nash. Kevin Nash. Kevin Big Sexy Nash. Kevin Nash. By Kevin Big Sexy Nash. And Kevin Big Sexy Nash. By Kevin Big Sexy Nash. Kevin Big Sexy Nash. By Big Sexy. And Big Sexy. By Big Sexy. Big Sexy. By Nash. And Nash. By Nash. Nash. By Kevin Nash. And Kevin Nash. By Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash. Conan. Conan. K-Dog. K-Dog. Conan. K-Dog. Conan. By Conan. And Conan. By Conan. Conan. By K-Dog. And K-Dog. By K-Dog. K-Dog. Kaz. Kaz. Kaz Hayashi. Kaz Hayashi. 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 Kaz. Kaz Hayashi. Hayashi. Kaz Hayashi. By Kaz. And Kaz. By Kaz. Kaz. By Kaz Hayashi. And Kaz Hayashi. By Kaz Hayashi. Kaz Hayashi. By Hayashi. And Hayashi. By Hayashi. Hayashi. Lex Luger. Lex Luger. The total package. The total package. Luger. Luger. The total package. Lex Luger. The total package. Lex Luger. Lex Luger. The total package. Luger. The total package. Lex Luger. Lex Luger. The total package. Lex Luger. By Lex Luger. And Lex Luger. By Lex Luger. Lex Luger. By the total package. And the total package. By the total package. The total package. By Luger. And Luger. By Luger. Luger. By the total package. Lex Luger. And the total package. Lex Luger. By the total package. Lex Luger. The total package. Lex Luger. Lismark Jr. Lismark Jr. Lismark Jr. Lismark Jr. By Lismark Jr. And Lismark Jr. By Lismark Jr. Lismark Jr. La Parka. La Parka. La Parka. La Parka. By La Parka. And La Parka. By La Parka. La Parka, Marcus Buff Bagwell, Marcus Buff Bagwell, Buff Bagwell, Buff Bagwell, 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 Buff, Buff, Marcus Buff Bagwell, Buff Bagwell, Bagwell, Buff, Marcus Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell by Marcus Buff Bagwell and Marcus Buff Bagwell by Marcus Buff Bagwell. Marcus Buff Bagwell by Buff Bagwell and Buff Bagwell by Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell by Bagwell and Bagwell by Bagwell. Bagwell by Buff and Buff. By Buff, Buff, Meng, 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 by Meng, and Meng, by Meng, Meng, the Macho Man Randy Savage, the Macho Man Randy Savage, Randy Savage, Randy Savage, the Macho Man, Macho Man, Macho Man, Macho Man, Savage, Savage, the Macho Man Randy Savage, Randy Savage, the Macho Man, Macho Man, Savage, the Macho Man Randy Savage, Randy Savage. By the Macho Man Randy Savage and the Macho Man Randy Savage by the Macho Man Randy Savage, the Macho Man Randy Savage by Randy Savage and Randy Savage by Randy Savage, Randy Savage by the Macho Man and the Macho Man by the Macho Man, the Macho Man by the Macho Man by Macho Man and Macho Man by Macho Man, Macho Man by Savage and Savage. By Savage, Savage, by Savage. Psychosis, Psychosis, Psychosis. Psychosis, by Psychosis, and Psychosis, by Psychosis. Psychosis, Raven, 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 by Raven, and Raven, by Raven, Raven, Rey Mysterio Jr., Rey Mysterio Jr., Rey Mysterio, Rey Mysterio, 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 Rey Mysterio Jr., Rey Mysterio, Mysterio, Rey Mysterio Jr., by Rey Mysterio Jr., and Rey Mysterio Jr., by Rey Mysterio Jr., Rey Mysterio Jr., by Rey Mysterio, and Rey Mysterio, by Rey Mysterio, Rey Mysterio, by Mysterio, and Mysterio, by Mysterio, Mysterio, Rick Steiner, Rick Steiner, 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 the dog-faced gremlin, the dog-faced gremlin, Rick Steiner, Steiner, the dog-faced gremlin, Rick Steiner, by Rick Steiner, and Rick Steiner, by Rick Steiner, Rick Steiner, by Steiner, and Steiner, by Steiner, Steiner, by the dog-faced gremlin, and the dog-faced gremlin, by the dog-faced gremlin, the dog-faced gremlin, Saturn, 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 by Saturn, and Saturn, by Saturn, Saturn, Sick Boy, Sick Boy, Sick Boy, Sick Boy, by Sick Boy, and Sick Boy, by Sick Boy, Sick Boy, Scott Hall, Scott Hall, 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 Scott Hall, Hall, Scott Hall, by Scott Hall, and Scott Hall, by Scott Hall, Scott Hall, by Hall, and Hall, by Hall, Hall, Steve Mongo McMichael, Steve Mongo McMichael, Steve McMichael, Steve McMichael, 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 Mongo, Mongo, Steve Mongo McMichael, Steve McMichael, McMichael, Mongo, Steve Mongo McMichael, Steve McMichael, by Steve Mongo McMichael, and Steve Mongo McMichael, by Steve Mongo McMichael, Steve Mongo McMichael, by Steve McMichael, and Steve McMichael, by Steve McMichael, Steve McMichael, by McMichael, and McMichael, by McMichael, McMichael, by Mongo, and Mongo, by Mongo, Mongo, Scott Norton, Scott Norton, 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 Scott Norton, Norton, Scott Norton, by Scott Norton, and Scott Norton, by Scott Norton, Scott Norton, by Norton, and Norton, by Norton, Norton, Stevie Ray, Stevie Ray, Stevie Ray, Stevie Ray, by Stevie Ray, and Stevie Ray, by Stevie Ray, Stevie Ray, Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner, Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner, Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, Scott Steiner, 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 Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner, Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner, Steiner, Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner, Scott Steiner, by Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner, and Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner. By Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner. Scott Big Papa Pump Steiner. By Big Papa Pump. And Big Papa Pump. By Big Papa Pump. Big Papa Pump. By Scott Steiner. And Scott Steiner. By Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner. By Steiner. And Steiner. By Steiner. Steiner. Sting. 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 By Sting. And Sting. By Sting. Sting. Tokyo Magnum. Tokyo Magnum. Tokyo Magnum. Tokyo Magnum. By Tokyo Magnum. And Tokyo Magnum. By Tokyo Magnum. Tokyo Magnum. Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo. Ultimo. Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo. Ultimo Dragon. By Ultimo Dragon. And Ultimo Dragon. By Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo Dragon. By Ultimo. And Ultimo. By Ultimo. Ultimo. Arn Anderson. Arn Anderson. The Enforcer Arn Anderson. The Enforcer Arn Anderson. The Enforcer. The Enforcer. Anderson. Anderson. Arn Anderson. The Enforcer Arn Anderson. The Enforcer. Anderson. Arn Anderson. The Enforcer Arn Anderson. By Arn Anderson. And Arn Anderson. By Arn Anderson. Arn Anderson. By the Enforcer Arn Anderson. And the Enforcer Arn Anderson. By the Enforcer Arn Anderson. The Enforcer Arn Anderson. By the Enforcer. And the Enforcer. By the Enforcer. The Enforcer. By Anderson. And Anderson. By Anderson. Anderson. Bigelow. Bigelow. Bam Bam. Bam Bam. Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow. Bigelow. Bam Bam. Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow. By Bigelow. And Bigelow. By Bigelow. Bigelow. By Bam Bam. And Bam Bam. By Bam Bam. Bam Bam. By Bam Bam Bigelow. And Bam Bam Bigelow. By Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow. Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Eaton. Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. By Bobby Eaton. And Bobby Eaton. By Bobby Eaton. Bobby Eaton. By beautiful Bobby Eaton. And beautiful Bobby Eaton. By beautiful Bobby Eaton. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. By beautiful Bobby. And beautiful Bobby. By beautiful Bobby. Beautiful Bobby. By Eaton. And Eaton. By Eaton. Eaton. Bobby Blaze. Bobby Blaze. 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 Bobby Blaze. Blaze. Bobby Blaze. By Bobby Blaze. And Bobby Blaze. By Bobby Blaze. Bobby Blaze. By Blaze. And Blaze. By Blaze. Blaze. Doug Dillinger. Doug Dillinger. 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 Doug Dillinger. Dillinger. Doug Dillinger. By Doug Dillinger. And Doug Dillinger. By Doug Dillinger. Doug Dillinger. By Dillinger. And Dillinger. By Dillinger. Dillinger. Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. The Mouth of the South. The Mouth of the South. Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart. 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 Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. The Mouth of the South. Jimmy Hart. Hart. Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. Jimmy Hart. By Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. And Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. By Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart. By the Mouth of the South. And the Mouth of the South. By the Mouth of the South. The Mouth of the South. By Jimmy Hart. And Jimmy Hart. By Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart. By Hart. And Hart. By Hart. Hart. Lash LeRoux. Lash LeRoux. 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 Lash LeRoux. LeRoux. Lash LeRoux. By Lash LeRoux. And Lash LeRoux. By Lash LeRoux. Lash LeRoux. By LeRoux. And LeRoux. By LeRoux. LeRoux. Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund. By Mean Gene Okerlund. And Mean Gene Okerlund. By Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund. Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff. 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 Paul Orndorff. Orndorff. and Paul Orndorff by Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff and Orndorff by Orndorff. Orndorff, Flair. Flair, the Nature Boy. The Nature Boy. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Ric Flair. Ric Flair, Flair. The Nature Boy. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Ric Flair. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. By Flair and Flair. By Flair. Flair by Flair. By the Nature Boy. And the Nature Boy. By the Nature Boy. The Nature Boy. By the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. And the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. By the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. By Ric Flair. And Ric Flair. By Ric Flair. Ric Flair. By Ric Flair. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. Sarge. Sarge. The Sarge. The Sarge. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. Sarge. The Sarge. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. By Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. And Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. By Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker. By Sarge. And Sarge. By Sarge. Sarge. By the Sarge. And the Sarge. By the Sarge. The Sarge. Sonny Onoo. Sonny Onoo. Sonny Onoo. Sonny Onoo. By Sonny Onoo. And Sonny Onoo. By Sonny Onoo. Sonny Onoo. Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase. 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 Ted DiBiase. DiBiase. Ted DiBiase. By Ted DiBiase. And Ted DiBiase. By Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase. By DiBiase. And DiBiase. By DiBiase. DiBiase. Wrath. 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 By Wrath. And Wrath. By Wrath. Wrath. Ernest Miller. Ernest Miller. Ernest the Cat Miller. Ernest the Cat Miller. 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 Ernest Miller. Ernest the Cat Miller. Miller. Ernest Miller. Ernest the Cat Miller. By Ernest Miller. And Ernest Miller. By Ernest Miller. Ernest Miller. By Ernest the Cat Miller. And Ernest the Cat Miller. By Ernest the Cat Miller. Ernest the Cat Miller. By Miller. And Miller. By Miller. Miller. Glacier. 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 By Glacier. And Glacier. By Glacier. Glacier. Prince Iakea. Prince Iakea. 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 The Hawaiian High Flyer. The Hawaiian High Flyer. Prince Iakea. Iakea. The Hawaiian High Flyer. Prince Iakea. By Prince Iakea. And Prince Iakea. By Prince Iakea. Prince Iakea. By Iakea. And Iakea. By Iakea. Iakea. By the Hawaiian High Flyer. And the Hawaiian High Flyer. By the Hawaiian High Flyer. The Hawaiian High Flyer. Scotty Riggs. Scotty Riggs. 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 Scotty Riggs. Riggs. Scotty Riggs. By Scotty Riggs. And Scotty Riggs. By Scotty Riggs. Scotty Riggs. By Riggs. And Riggs. By Riggs. Riggs. Warrior. 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 By Warrior. And Warrior. By Warrior. Warrior. Bischoff. Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. By Bischoff. And Bischoff. By Bischoff. Bischoff. By Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff. By Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. Super Calo. Super Calo. Super Calo. Super Calo. By Super Calo. And Super Calo. By Super Calo. Super Calo. Duncombe Jr. Duncombe Jr. Bobby Duncombe Jr. Bobby Duncombe Jr. Duncombe Jr. Bobby Duncombe Jr. Bobby Duncombe Jr. By Duncombe Jr. And Duncombe Jr. By Duncombe Jr. Duncombe Jr. By Bobby Duncombe Jr. And Bobby Duncombe Jr. By Bobby Duncombe Jr. Bobby Duncombe Jr. Mike Enos. Mike Enos. 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 Mike Enos. Enos. Mike Enos. By Mike Enos. And Mike Enos. By Mike Enos. Mike Enos. By Enos. And Enos. By Enos. Enos. Barry Windham. Barry Windham. 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 Barry Windham. Windham. Barry Windham. By Barry Windham. And Barry Windham. By Barry Windham. Barry Windham. By Windham. And Windham. By Windham. Windham. Horace Hogan. Horace Hogan. Horace Hogan. Horace Hogan, by Horace Hogan, and Horace Hogan, by Horace Hogan, Horace Hogan, Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, 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 Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, 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 Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, by Norman Smiley, by Norman Smiley, and Norman Smiley, by Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, and Norman Smiley, by Norman Smiley, Norman Smiley, by Smiley, by Smiley, and Smiley, by Smiley, Smiley, and Smiley, by Smiley, Smiley, Kevin Sullivan, Kevin Sullivan, 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 Kevin Sullivan, Sullivan, Kevin Sullivan! By Kevin Sullivan! By Kevin Sullivan! By Sullivan! By Sullivan! And Kevin Sullivan! Kevin Sullivan! Kenny Chaos! Kenny Chaos! 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 Kenny Chaos! Chaos! Kenny Chaos! By Kenny Chaos! By Kenny Chaos! By Chaos! By Chaos! And Kenny Chaos! Kenny Chaos! Tony Schiavone! Tony Schiavone! 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 Tony Schiavone! Schiavone! Me! Tony Schiavone! Me! By Tony Schiavone! And Tony Schiavone! By Tony Schiavone! Tony Schiavone! By Schiavone! And Schiavone! By Schiavone! Schiavone! By me! And me! By me! Me! Hack! 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 By Hack! By Hack! And Hack! Hack! The Disciple! The Disciple! The Disciple! The Disciple! By the Disciple! And the Disciple! By the Disciple! The Disciple! El Gigante! El Gigante! El Gigante! El Gigante! By El Gigante! By El Gigante! And El Gigante! El Gigante! Rage! Rage! By Rage! By Rage! And Rage! The Demon! The Demon! The Demon! The Demon! By the Demon! By the Demon! And the Demon! The Demon!